welcome to Unmatched. Being a founder and building a brand and a business is no easy task, trust me. I guess it never really was, but these days I think it's next level hard. You have to master so many skills beyond just owning and developing the product that you're selling. And a lot of that involves speaking. Whether it's to investors, consumers, partners, or in public, speaking has become, along with building a personal brand, one of the most important areas of self development for me. And my guest today is Pascalle Bergmans, a public speaking pro, founder of Presentales, and former musical performer. Pascalle will share her insights on how mastering public speaking can elevate your brand and business. Pascalle, welcome to Unmatched.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
I know it's been a long time coming. And I will preface our conversation by saying that Pascal and I worked together about a year and a half ago on my speaking skills. And she's been transformational with how I not only speak, but also how I take care of my voice, which was a very big issue for me. So thank you
Mm,
for that.
You're very welcome. It was such, I can't believe it's a year and a half ago now. When
I
did
know.
that happen?
I know.
Like,
It's just time flies.
oh, yeah, no, it was a joy to work with you. It was so much fun. And it was amazing to see how literally finding your voice, literally, helped you to catapult you into what you're doing now. It's been amazing to be part of that journey.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it, and you know how much of an impact you've had on that journey for me. So I want to step right into it, and I want to ask you the most important question that I have when it comes to public speaking, and that is how can someone improve their public speaking skills even if they have a fear of speaking in front of an audience? I mean, I'm sure that this is what everybody thinks about it. Like, we all want to see ourselves on stage, but then we're terrified of being in front of, all those people looking at us and waiting for us to say something. How do you overcome that?
Yeah, so I always, when people ask me these types of questions, I always say, well, we're having a conversation now, right? You're talking to me now. That's all it is. All that public speaking is speaking in public, but you're already speaking. You know how to talk, you know how to have a conversation, you know what you want to say because you're already the expert in what you are doing and what you have as a gift. So when people say I'm so nervous, I say, well, we're just having a conversation. Now just imagine having a conversation with 50, 100, 1,000 people. That's all that it is, because we make public speaking into something that is a lot bigger than that it really is.
Which sounds easy, but in practice, we're going to unpack, we're going to really unpack how that actually works because there's a lot of tips and tricks of how to, from memorizing what you have to say to
Mm,
having the confidence of saying what you want to say in front of so many people. It's different when you are in a smaller setting with someone that you trust, but it's a very different thing when you're in front of 1,000 people that you don't know. One thing that
exactly.
has helped me that sort of helped me in this journey of overcoming the fear of speaking in public was the idea that when you are on stage, it's not really about you. It's not
Mm,
about you and what people think of you on the stage, but it's about the message that you want people to take away from this, and that the message should be so transformational and so important that you want to make sure you want to share it with the world so that you're giving the audience an opportunity to listen to it and receive it from you. How do you look at that?
So I think that's true, right? Because it's never about you and it's always about serving at the pleasure of your audience. However, you can say the same thing. It's very easy to go, well, it's about the message, it's not about me. But your brain is still going to go panic, panic, panic because they're all looking at me. What if I say something wrong? What if they disagree? What if I look stupid? Like these are the things that I hear every day in my line of work. So I always say to people, don't try to beat the anxiety because that's not going to happen, right? That's a long process and something it needs a psychologist. Okay, so don't try to beat the anxiety, but try to feel the gratitude. So when we look at the brain, your brain, where you feel anxiety, is also where you feel gratitude. So you can't feel both things at the same time. So that's why we need to practice that gratitude of, I get to share this message. I get to share a piece of myself with these beautiful people. They're here to listen to whatever I have to say, not to me as a person, but to the message that I want to convey. So it's a bit deeper than just thinking it's about the message, it's about the message, it's about the message. It's about being grateful that you get to share that message and walking alongside that anxiety, because you are going to tremble. You are going to sweat from places you didn't know you can sweat from. You are going to have that feeling in your stomach or in your tummy going, oh my gosh, when you're going up into a roller coaster. That's just learning how to manage your physical stress levels, which there's lots of tips and tricks for. There's breathing exercises that you can do for that. But it's fixing the thing in your brain. So it's hijacking your amygdala to not go into full overdrive, get that limbic system going, and making sure that that prefrontal cortex stays functioning.
And how do you do that? Like, give me, what are your, like, literally, I am about to walk on stage. I'm sweating for places that I didn't know exist, which is like a brilliant way to say this, which is, I think, is very accurate.
Yeah.
And I'm about to pass out and I'm about to run away and not really go on stage and just disappear. What
Hmm.
do I do?
All right, you do two things for me, okay? One, you go and do some jumping jacks, because nerves are often just a build up of adrenaline. Yeah, they're just adrenaline that doesn't have a space to go, so it just goes and goes crazy into your body. So do a few jumping jacks, because what that also does, it gets you breathing, okay? Because what we
Hmm.
do when we get anxious, we start breathing very high into the chest and we stop breathing out. People keep breathing in, but we stop breathing out. Now, I always say to people, because this is number two, oxygen is free. It's one of the only things in the world, really, that's free at the moment, if we look at the cost of living. Okay? So make use of that. So when we look at the diaphragm, which is a muscle, it's a dome shaped muscle that sits in your belly, just under your rib cage. And that muscle's only function is to breathe. Yeah? That's when you see a puppy breathe or a baby, their belly goes up and down. That's the feeling that we want to create, because your diaphragm is linked to your parasympathetic nervous system, which means if I can control my breathing, I can control how much I'm going to freak out up here in my brain. Okay. So
Hmm.
that means that when we breathe in, we expand the rib cage, but also that belly, we let it come out. And especially as women, we are taught to always suck it in, suck it in, suck it in. We need to look skinny. We need to look good, right? Let it go, okay? Just let it flow and let it go. That's the mantra that we need to keep in our minds here. So let that belly come out. Now, when you breathe out, I want you to just breathe in, or sorry, breathe out with your belly button. So pull that belly button to the back, but keeping that diaphragm active, nice and out there. So that helps you to maintain a strong diaphragm that goes up and down in a very normal way without losing control over that breathing. Because once we lose that control, we give the nerves and the anxiety free rein, and we need to avoid that at all costs. So, number one, jumping jacks, get rid of the adrenaline. Number two, get breathing, let it flow, and let it go.
Easy. And I think that's something that anyone can implement. Behind the stage, you're like jumping there and then
Yeah,
you're breathing.
I
Yeah,
do
but
it.
yeah. And actually, it really works. Now, we will unpack a lot more about this, but I want to go to the actual muscle that helps you speak, which is here, right? In the
Yes.
throat. What was very interesting to figure out while working with you, Pascalle, was the fact that I had such an issue with the way that I was speaking that was creating such a pressure on my voice. And
Mm.
you've been so amazing in helping me overcome that. Now, at the time, you told me that a lot of people actually experience that. So, for everyone listening or watching us right now, let's talk about a little bit about why that is happening and how can you overcome it?
Right. So, what happens in the throat? So, the muscle that you're speaking about, it's not really a muscle, it's more like a mechanism. It's called your larynx. Yeah. And if anybody will put their hands onto their throat, you can feel there's this big, bulky thing. That's your larynx. And your larynx is made up of bone, soft tissue, muscles, fatty tissue, all of that fun stuff, membranes. And in there, we have your vocal cords. Now, The way your vocal cords move, we have the arytenoid muscle group, which basically sits around your larynx to help it move up and down. Because when we move it up and down, we can change our voice, we can change the way we sound, and therefore increase our pitching pattern or our vocal variety. So this is what we do when we're building what we call your vocal identity. Now, a lot of trauma gets stored within your throat. Because if we look at illness, for example, or sickness, your throat is basically the gatekeeper of your health. Yeah. Whenever you get sick, it will start there because if the germs get through in there, then they get through to the rest of your body. So these are the gatekeepers of your health, not just your physical health, also your mental health. Notice that when you really need to cry, for example, you will feel that that larynx starts to push and you're really trying not to cry, but that larynx really starts to push. And that strain, we put that on our larynx all the time. When we go through trauma, when we go through horrible experiences in life, when we go through heartbreak, for example, that trauma gets stored there. And what we get is a larynx that stops moving as much. So we get throat issues, we get pain constantly when we speak, before we speak, after we speak, and we have a lack of vocal identity. So our voice actually becomes quite boring, and therefore we become really boring to listen to, even though we have something very important to say. So when people start working on that larynx, so we do things like gliding your larynx up and down, yawning exercises to get that movement back in there, those muscles start to relax. And when those muscles relax, you can guess it, the trauma lets go. And that's when people often have breakthroughs, emotional breakthroughs that leave them in tears for a little while. But then after that, you'll notice that your voice is so much clearer, so much nicer, and there's so much freedom that comes from that voice. So people who don't say what they mean, for example, people who've been through severe childhood trauma, they will always have that tugging feeling right there. And when you have a good cry, for example, and you might have experienced this at home, you can feel, oh, my voice feels lighter and easier. That's because of your arytenoid muscles.
That was just fascinating for me to go through with you and come on the other side of it, I have to say. And the most, you know this story because we talked about this quite a lot, but I used to
Mm.
get sick very much from the throat, right? Like every
Yeah.
time I would get sick, it would be starting right here in the throat. And
Mm.
funny enough, every time I would have a big, very important meeting where I would have to speak or a big presentation where I would have to be on stage, guess what?
You
I would
got
get
sick.
sick and I would
Yeah.
get sick from the throat. And it got to a point, and I'm sure you'll remember this conversation where I was telling you why is my voice sabotaging me? Why is my body sabotaging me? And after doing all these exercises and going through that process with you, I kid you not, I do not get sick in before an important meeting or before an important presentation anymore. And it was just blowing my mind away to actually realize that that was just trauma stored in
Yeah.
the neck.
And it's also not saying, not talking about what you truly want to talk about, right? We see this with people who swallow their words. There's a reason why there are these sayings like swallowing your words. It's because you're literally taking them back down and they get stuck in this part of your throat. Now, that sounds a bit wishy washy, but when you then finally start speaking about what you're truly passionate about, what you really want to say, your voice is clearer than ever. So your body knows. Don't try to fool it, okay? Your body knows exactly what it wants.
Which is crazy because in the end we're trying to manage a lot of things with our head, but then
Mhm.
in reality our body, as you say, really knows what you need. The other thing that you taught me, and I would like you to speak about that, is to try to sleep with the mouth closed, which was like, what do you mean, what is this even? And you told me to like zip it, and just like put a plaster on it, which I did, and it completely transformed the way that I sleep and the
Mhm.
quality of the sleep. And since then, you literally just saved my life basically and changed my life. Now please do the same for everyone else listening to you.
All right. So this is definitely not my own idea. There is a lot of research. There are lots of books that explain this. So that's how I obviously got to know this. It's something that I do myself. So you can buy specific mouth strips, or you can put a piece of tape will do as well. You can put it horizontally or vertically onto your mouth. And when you go to sleep, what we do, we often like our mouth falls open, we then get pressure onto the larynx, and we often wake up with a bit of a good morning, right? We get that feeling in our throat. We want to avoid that because you only have one set of vocal cords, and if you ruin them, you're not going to get anything in return, okay? You're not going to get anything back. So when you put that strip and you literally zip it, your mouth won't open in the night and you will only breathe in through your nose. Now, your mouth isn't made for breathing, okay? Your nose, its purpose is to breathe. So we actually let the nose do what it needs to do. It filters out all of the toxins that are in the air and it gives you all of that good, clean air into your lungs and through your system because oxygen goes everywhere with your blood and everything. So your nose helps you to use the oxygen in a more efficient way. So you sleep deeper, you sleep better, and you don't ruin your voice in the process. So it's a win-win
Win
for
win.
everyone. Yeah, it really is. And you really do wake up feeling more refreshed. But also when you do some deep nasal breaths, and I know we did this exercise, when you do 5 of them, you'll start to feel lightheaded because you actually get more oxygen in. Because when you breathe in through your mouth, what we see is that the chest comes up right away. So we get that chest breathing, which we want to avoid at all times. When you then breathe out and we go from the belly with the nose, you instantly feel that belly come out and breathing becomes so much easier. So in this world where we're always in a rush, we're trying to cut in, right? We try to cut in and say what we need to say. Try to just breathe with your nose and watch what happens to your audience when you just breathe in and take that moment because it builds suspense, but it also helps you to set yourself up for success.
Now, at this point, I'm wondering, why is Pascalle so smart? How does she know? How does she know all these things?
It's the
And
only thing I know.
why? Why on earth would someone go in such a depth of studying the voice? And I'll be honest, when I started working with you, I thought, I would the public speaking would be about like how to craft the presentation, which it was, and other things like how to say something properly. But I didn't think it would get so technical and it would literally change the way that I speak and that I sleep.
Mhm.
So take me back to your own journey of how you got to do what you're doing today.
Right. So it's a bit of a funky one, right? You know my story. So when I was little, my mother played Tinkerbell in the musical Peter Pan, and I became obsessed with the theater because not just because of the clothes and the songs and the dances. No, it wasn't about that. It was always about how you could transform people and transport them into your world. And because I wanted to become a musical theater performer, I had to learn how to sing. Now, music was always a big part of my upbringing anyway. So I was 7 years old when I started singing lessons in a small town in Roosendaal with an amazing teacher. And she brought me back to basics. And in the first 3 years of singing lessons, I barely sang. All we did was breathe. Because she said, it's just like ballet, it's like maths, it's like anything you do in life. You need the good foundations. If you don't understand the foundations, how do you expect to get to the level that you want to get to? So for 3 years, all we did, diaphragmatic breathing, we worked on nasal breathing, we worked on heavy breathing, shallow breathing, all of the types of breathing in order to get that foundation so that when we finally started singing, the flow of air was so easy, came so natural that I could produce sounds that were abnormal for a 10-year-old at that stage, right? So that's how I went through life. And I very, very early on learned and got obsessed with why am I learning all of this? Because it was boring as hell, okay? 3 years of breathing, that's all I did. Didn't get to sing a word. But when I felt how easy everything became after that, and when I then went to drama school, I then moved to the UK, I saw that lots of these people didn't have that base. So I decided to really go into the books and study it more and more and more, eventually trained as a vocal coach. I did some breath work. So I really wanted to understand why my voice could do all of these things, different styles, different heights, very low. I had a massive range and I wanted to find out why that was and if anybody could do that. Turns out most people can, it's just that they haven't built the right foundations. And this happens from when we are children. We get taught how to speak. We don't get taught how to breathe. However, without the right flow of air, your voice will never reach its true potential. So instead of teaching children to speak, let's teach them how to breathe first. Okay, and how to use their breath. And then, yeah, I went through my whole career. Some of the people listening might know I had a stroke 6 years ago. So I lost everything. And then I sort of fell back in love with this whole how do you speak properly? Because that was the only thing I had was books and learning and reading for like a few months of my life. That's all I could do. And as I went into the corporate space, because, I still needed to pay the bills, I saw that people were always breathing up there. Always. Like they never breathed from the belly because it was all stress, and even the way they were speaking was all stress, stress, stress. So, yeah, I sort of became my mission to help people avoid that. And that exploded into what is now Presentales. So, yeah, breathing has literally saved my life.
Well, I can tell you one thing: no amount of breathing lessons would get me to sing. I, I'm
Well,
sorry,
say
like
about
nobody in this world would make me transform me in someone that can
that.
sing any type of note that doesn't sound awful. So let's start with that. But it's very fascinating to see that actually the base is so much more important than
Mm,
actually jumping into doing something. And I guess that's like in life, that's like everything, right? You want to go, you want to fast forward to the end of a process and you want to be at the top of your game, but you forget that it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of boring stuff in order to get to do the things that you love with ease, or the things that you want to
yeah.
be good at with ease. And this is the crucial part, right, which I would love for you to spend a few minutes clarifying. It's not so much that you learn how to speak in public. The point of this all the whole process is that you do it with ease, with
Mm.
gratitude, having finding pleasure in sharing that message with the world. It's not so much as just being prepared with a nice presentation and look nice on stage, but literally enjoying that process and that journey.
Yeah, and you can learn that from YouTube, right? Well, you can go on YouTube and or Google and like how do you prepare for a presentation? There are lots of hits that you'll get that'll tell you how to prepare for a presentation. And when I tell people these things, that's nothing new, right? Of course you need to prepare. Of course you need to rehearse. There's all of that stuff, but it's the stuff that we don't think about. It's how do you breathe? How do you exist alongside of your anxiety? How do you prepare your mind and your body instead of just your presentation, because it's so much more than the words that you're going to say and the beautiful slides that you've prepared. That all becomes moot if you don't look after how you are going to show up in that moment in time. So that's why we always spend a lot of time on that. You've seen it in my coaching. We spend a lot of time on just looking at you, how you're going to show up so that you can serve that audience to the best of your ability.
So now let's focus on the business side of speaking.
Yeah.
What are the main differences between speaking or performing on stage and being a speaker on stage and speaking in a business context?
The main difference is that I do not get a standing ovation every time I speak.
You do for me every time, don't you?
It's like when you do musical theater, right? I did that for 20 years. Yeah, you get well, if you've done a good job, especially when you're at that higher level, you get a standing ovation and everybody claps after everything that you do. And there's singing and dancing involved. Now, when I go on stage now and I speak more, it's in a business context. I sometimes get standing ovations, which is great. But there's less singing, less dancing, and there's fewer standing ovations because it's all very professional. And we all need to be very professional. So we do not go outside of the realms of that. But that is, I think, the only difference. And I believe that from with my history in performing in drama and the performing arts, it has taught me how to project my voice and make it go through the room instead of just pointing it out there. How to use my body language and not be afraid to test stuff out. I feel like a lot of speakers, they go, well, this is who I am, and I'm going to stay within those boundaries. There's so much more outside of that that is so much more exciting to watch, okay? Because first and foremost, whether you're speaking to 10 people or 10,000 people, your job is to entertain. Yeah, the most boring thing you can do as a speaker is inform. Well, these are the numbers from the year. Look how great we did. Bah, 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 bah. It's the most boring thing you can do. So, your first job, when you're asking for people's time and attention, is to entertain them. So, that's why I think that there's a lot of overlap between musical theater and acting and normal public speaking in a business setting. It's all about entertaining your audience. It's experimenting with who you are and how you're showing up on a given day. It's experimenting with how you can pull every single person in that room into your world. That's what it's all about. So there's very little difference.
How about storytelling? Because you,
Right.
you, you talked about how informing is mostly the boring way to do it. Entertaining is obviously very important. What about storytelling? What function does it play in this idea of entertaining, inspiring the audience?
Right. So storytelling does two things. It builds urgency, and we get that currency of trust in there. And it has this thing called image building. Yeah. So when we have the audacity to get up on a stage and say, listen to me, because it takes that kind of audacity to ask for people's times, which is their most valued asset. And when we introduce storytelling, we can build those images. Yeah. So we can make them feel something. And in order for people to want to keep listening, they need to make a choice to want to keep listening. And for people to make a decision, they need emotion. Yeah. Without those emotional markers, it becomes basically impossible for human beings to make the decision to buy a product, to buy a service, to invest in something, or to keep listening to you. Because that is your job as a speaker, to earn every single minute that you're on stage. You need to earn their attention. So storytelling builds images. Yeah. If I say to you, now imagine that you're on the beach and it's like the 4 o'clock sun, golden hour, really nice and warm, but it doesn't burn your skin. You can feel the sand between your toes. We're both on a beach. Your beach might be in Bali, mine might be in the south of France, but we have the same feeling of, oh, yes, relaxation, nice, warmth. Yeah, so that's what storytelling does in the first place. And it brings up those great feelings of excitement, relaxation, fear, sadness. Like there's all these complex emotions that we can have when we use storytelling correctly. Now, what that does at the same time, it builds urgency. When I'm pitching, for example, or I'm teaching someone how to pitch, people talk about their product. Look at our product, it's so amazing, aren't we great? Blah, 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 blah. Whilst they forget to talk about the problem and the challenges that brings. Because when you can go into those problems and you can go into those challenges and make your audience understand why their problem is such a big problem and make them feel the pain, you're building emotional urgency. Because A, they're going to think, oh my God, I'm in some serious trouble. And B, they're going to think, how do I solve this? And then you come in with your solution, yeah? Or the great thing that you want to share with them. So it's all about using storytelling to build images, to get those emotional markers going, because it basically gets all of our hormones and neurotransmitters going on in our brain, which is what we need to make a decision. And then also building that emotional urgency and creating that currency of trust to help people make their final decision and to really submerge them into your world.
And as they say, it's like paint the picture, right? First, before you try to sell, like paint the
Yeah.
picture of what you're trying, that future scenario that you're trying to build towards, and then eventually you get there. And this, I feel, is so important for marketers. And I see it
Mm,
all the time. I don't, we're not trained to be public speakers, which I think is a big mistake. I think
yeah.
when we train our marketers of the future, we should really think about public speaking, being a really big part of that training, and
Mm,
understanding from the beginning as you start your career what marketing is really about, right? And a lot of it is about storytelling and
yeah.
taking people on journeys, and journeys of transformation even. That's what the best brands do, at least, right?
Yeah.
What are the biggest mistakes that you see founders and people that you typically work with do that have an easy fix, and how would you then fix those things?
Right. So the biggest mistake I see is a lack of conflict. Yeah, a lot of founders, what you say, they start talking about the journey right away, and they go paint this new world picture and look how beautiful this is, and your life is going to be so much easier, and ba 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 ba. Nobody cares, because you need to make us care about our problem first. Yeah, so I always say before you start selling the new world, unsell the old world, unsell the current situation. That means we need to see the conflict. We need to see what the problem is. We need to understand why that is a problem, because no pain, no gain, right? So you need to make us care deeply about our problem first. Yeah, so that we go, oh my gosh, I need to solve this right now. So unsell the current world before you then go into the transformation. Because yes, good marketing is about transformation, but there is no transformation without conflict. Look at any book, movie, theater, play, anything like that. They start with conflict before we can see transformation. So the easy thing you can do, there are lots of storytelling frameworks that have this conflict built in right there. Go onto Google, look up storytelling frameworks, you'll get hundreds of hits, okay? I obviously have a few up my sleeve as well. I've got a very simple one that I use for all my pitches or when people have to do proposals, for example. It's called story selling, where we build out the situation. So we show that empathy, like, hey, this is what's going on. Then we build the problem. Then we build out the challenge. They're two different things, okay? The problem is basically a statement of what is going wrong. And the challenge is the implications that happen when you don't act. Yeah, so unselling, unselling, unselling this current situation. Only then, once you have them high in that emotional urgency, then we come in with the transformation. Here's our product. Here's our service. These are the results that we're getting with them. Because you need to earn to talk about your product. Yeah, you need to earn that attention. And you do that only through this way. So conflict, then transformation, not transformation only.
Got it. Conflict transformation. That is the write it down, everyone who's listening or watching,
Hey
because
nerds.
that's a very, very good tip. Now let's focus also on the actual speech, preparation of the speech and the presentation. One of the biggest things that you have taught me is to work on the structure of the presentation before actually going into the development of it and
Yeah.
focusing on what are the objectives, what is the main message that you want to share with people, and then basically building a structure that takes you there through a flow, and through going through the conflict and then the transformation, right? So let's spend a few minutes explaining to everyone how that works, and how do you build it out when maybe you have just a tiny bit of an idea of what the topic is, but you have
Yeah.
no clue how to get to the actual structure. Because one if there's one thing that I learned through this is once you have the structure, everything just works out. You know exactly what to put in
Mm.
every slide, know exactly what you have to say at every moment of the presentation. But until you get to that structure, you're just completely lost.
Yeah, it's a bit like a paint by number, but it's a paint by presentation. Okay. You need to create this canvas and you know exactly where what goes. So the first thing we need to do is identify your essence. I call it essence. And that's all about knowing what your purpose is and your goal. Your purpose refers to the intention that you want to do. So, for example, I want to empower people to believe that they can also become public speakers. That's an intention that I have. My goal is to sign all of those people into my community, for example. That's just an example, right? So, you need to have those two really clear. If you struggle to get clear on those, one of my favorite exercises is the 5 whys exercise. I believe we did it as well.
Hmm.
It's where if I would ask you, what do you want to talk about? And you say, I want to talk about making marketing more accessible for women, for example. And then I ask you why 5 times. Because by asking why 5 times, you need to think deeper and deeper and deeper. And we get to a whole different answer by the end that is actually what you want to talk about. So, purpose and goal. And then if you struggle with that, use the 5 whys exercise to identify that really clearly. Now, the next thing we're going to do is divide your talk into parts. Just like paint by numbers, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the same with this. Yeah. So, part one, you want to hook in the audience. Don't start with an introduction. Oh my God, if I see another person do that, I'm gonna scream because it's terrible, right? Nobody wants to hear, hi, my name is Pascal, I'm the founder of Present. Who cares? Nobody cares, yeah? Entertainment first. So, what you do, I'm a big fan of the before we begin story. Hey guys, before we begin, I want to share with you that my mother played Tinkerbell in the musical Peter Pan. When I say that, people go, what? Yeah, and it gets their attention going. And it's a short anecdote, a short story that gives them an introduction into what we're going to talk about. And it makes them go, wow, okay, this person is interesting. This person has a cool story to share. And they settle in and then they start listening. So don't start with an introduction, start with a story always and forever. Okay, so that's part one. So it's always to intrigue, to excite, or to make them go, what is going on? Yeah, you really want to get that going in part one. So the only thing we do here is part 1 through 5. Let's say you have 5 parts for a 30-minute talk. You just write down the goal of each of these parts. Part one is to intrigue. Part two is to excite, right? So here we're going to talk about what you do for whom, for example, and you start to build a little bit of that new world. So you give them a slight sliver, but then you go into part three and you want to make them panic. That's your goal. Utter carnage and panic. Yeah. So you really start to build out the problem and the challenge and how hard this is going to be to solve. And then we go into part four where we have relief. We want to build that relief for people to go, oh my gosh, there is a solution for this. I am not totally screwed. Okay. And what you also want to put in there is your own framework, because having your own frameworks and methods, even though it might just be a 5-step process, try to put a word against it that you can use or anything like that to help you go, this is my, I have a spark framework, for example. So the S stands for something, the P stands for something, and that's how you go through your framework or your method. And it just sets you apart from the rest. It's a lot more exciting to listen to than just, here's my 5-step process to become a good public speaker. Yeah. So keep it exciting. And then part 5 is where you close off. And this is where you might want to make them emotional, or you might want to create relaxation or any type of feeling where you want your audience to end up. Yeah. So once you have those goals really clear, it becomes super easy. Part 1, now put 3 bullet points. And don't put a paragraph behind each bullet point of what you want to talk about. What is the goal of that part? Yeah. Write down the 3 things you're going to say that are going to remind you of the stories, of the data points that you need to share in order to get that goal done. Yeah, so if part 1 was to intrigue, I have Tinkerbell is one of my bullet points, just the words Tinkerbell. Then it might be theater, where I talk about how the theater basically saved my life. And I might have stroke. Yeah, I'm going to talk about how I had a stroke and then move into my life after a stroke. Those are the 3 bullet points, because you already know what you want to talk about. You don't have to write a script. You don't have to write every single detail because you're not going to remember it. And if you do that, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to learn a script and then having to say it like you're making it up in the moment. Because that's what an actor does. Actors are trained to say scripts as if it's their own thoughts and their own words. So that's why building this out helps you to spark those thoughts. And that's why we call it a thought track. Yeah? Because then if I hear Tinkerbell, I know exactly what I need to say. I know exactly, oh, my mom's story. Theater, I know exactly what I need to say there. And that's how you rehearse that. So then you just have to slot in all of these bits of information in there and you're done.
And guys, this right here explains exactly why every single corporate presentation is very boring.
Yes.
And I remember when we worked on this together, I was still in my corporate role, and I think I even told you, it's like, Pascalle, how would I ever be able to integrate this into a normal presentation that I need to do at work? People will think that I'm crazy. People will think that I'm just absolutely bonkers if I would go on the big stage, in front of everyone in the company, going with that sort of framework. So where's the middle ground? There's this thing in the corporate world. Everything it has to be so professional, which leads to a bit of a lack of empathy. There's a whole lack of storytelling. There's a whole lack of understanding how humans actually work. And because we perpetuate this over and over and over, even the marketers, the good marketers, forget how to actually present well and how to engage people and how to get people's attention. I'm talking even internally within a company. I'm not even talking externally, right? Because everything is connected. And if you're not able to engage people internally, how the, excuse me, are you going to get attention from the outside world, right? So, where's the middle ground?
So there's a very important question that I ask people when they say, "But what about but my corporate? They're not going to think I'm professional." A, what's professionalism? Look it up. What is it? Yeah, what does it mean in your company? Because your boss wants you to come home with that sale. Your boss wants you to engage that audience. You're not going to do it with facts alone, darling. It's not going to happen. Yeah, so ask yourself that question first. What does professionalism look like? Second, do you want to be forgettable or memorable? And people say, I want to be memorable. Cool. Then don't try to fit in. Then don't try to do the same thing that everybody in the company does. Because what we see in corporates, for example, or businesses, the big CEOs or the big senior leadership team, they present in the old style. Very boring, very factual, very, very professional, very executive like. And because the people under them and the people under them and the people under them see that type of presenting as, okay, if I need to get to the top, that's what I need to do, they are going to copy that. So before you know it, you have a whole business of 180 people who all present like the walking dead. Okay. And we don't want that. So if you want to stand out, if you want to be memorable, if you want to get people on your side, everybody watches movies, everybody reads books, everybody goes to plays. And why do we do that? Because we want to be entertained. So why not at work? And when I explain this to people, they go, right. Okay. So just start sharing. Yeah. And you decide where the line is, right? If I go on stage as myself, as Pascalle, I get to share whatever I want. But if I'm working for a big organization, I have to share some of their points and stories. But you can still add your personal experiences to that, get some stories from people within the business, get creative with that. But stop, please stop trying to fit in with what your senior leaders have done. Because I actually get a lot of senior leaders coming to me like, hey, I want everybody in my business to start presenting differently. Can you come and do a workshop? And I say, well, how about we work together first? Because they're looking at you. They're not going to change if you don't change.
I think that's such a good point, and I would completely agree. There's a lot of organizations that work exactly in the way that you describe. There's a second type of organizations that work in a little bit of a different way, which is there's someone at the top who's the king of the kingdom, who tries to get the attention, who is a good presenter, and you know is able to send the message across. But underneath that person, everyone else is scared to shine because, what if we're upsetting? What if it's, you know? And so I guess it just falls into the same idea that you were saying before, like, don't try to fit in, no matter what the situation is. The whole point here being, with respect to especially my world of marketers, I think it's just time to find our voice, right? Like I found my voice through coaching with you, through actual finding the voice in the throat and using it,
Yeah.
just not being afraid to understand the actual mechanics of what finding the voice actually means, which is not just simply doing your job mechanically, whatever the task is, whatever the role is that you have, but also understand the world, understand the consumers better, understand how public speaking works and what the mechanics there are, and how storytelling works, so that you yourself are able to develop that, so that you then understand the bigger context of how everything in marketing works, because it's just not that one mechanical thing that you need to execute. It's a much bigger context, and I think it's all, it's time for all of us to understand that a little deeper.
I think so too. And I think it's also have the audacity. Have the audacity to go, I'm going to go against the grain. Because if you're going to do what everybody else does, that's where you're going to end up doing the rest of your life. Don't do that. You're ruining special moments where you get to experience something cool, you get to try something out, and doors will open that you never even knew existed. So I think it's embracing the fear, and it's embracing the excitement that comes with that fear as well. It's like a roller coaster when you go up and you see how high you're going and you're thinking, oh my God, I want to get out. I want to get out. But then you go and you're having a great time. That's exactly what this feeling is going to be. So go up into the roller coaster, put your hands up in the air, and have fun.
And on this note, this is perfect for ending. And Pascal, I just want to say thank you for everything that you've taught me, the way that you've transformed the way that I speak, that I sleep, even, which is crazy to think. And, I just want to say, keep shining. It's lovely to see you always and to hear you speak because you're so inspirational and you've changed so many people's lives. So thank you so much for being on Unmatched today.
Thank you so much. It's going to make me emotional now. No, thank you really for having me and for sharing this passion for great speaking and great communication.